So we're going to talk about how foreign policy is used by fascists in order to affect an agenda of oppressing certain minorities at home. And I promise I did not go into this with the intention of calling it divide, but I got to like the fifth step and it said DIVID, and I was like, oh, well, I might as well round it out. So basically, right now, Trump is on a warpath with Iran for multiple reasons. The main reason is probably to try and get elected, and this is shown in in his old projecting tweets, where he definitely suggested that Obama was going to start a war with Iran to get reelected, and now he's doing it, and it goes to show that he probably thought it was an effective political tool. And but one of the other things that Trump is doing is something that a lot of other fascists do, and it starts with these steps. The first one is you decide on a target. The example here, Muslims in America. Very often it is Muslims. Second step is you identify an enemy from that group. Any rival faction that you can basically turn into your enemy. Whether it's someone you're experiencing a tense diplomatic process with, or somebody you've been engaged in a religious conflict with for generations, or someone that you have had multiple wars with and have continuously taken their land and continue to settle on their land. In this case, it's Iran. The third step is you vilify them. You have to treat them as an existential threat. And that's exactly what Trump has continued to do. That is exactly what Republican war hawks have always done. They say Iran is a terrorist nation. They're a terrorist state. They want to destroy Israel, wipe them off the map. Obviously, there are elements within Iran that are extremely radical, extremely fundamentalist, that want Iran, that do want to wipe Israel off the map. So once you've done that, you can basically say they're a threat to national security, and you initiate a conflict. You commit an act of war. And that's what Trump did by killing Soleimani. He literally assassinated one of their top generals. And basically, what you've said is Soleimani was a terrorist who murdered Americans, and he was a threat to our national security. He was going to kill more. And then what you do is, any retaliation you can say is an act of war or terror. And this is so hypocritical. When we perform military assassinations or military actions outside of war, we treat it as national security. But when anyone does it to us or our allies, we will say it is terrorism. And it's entirely, our definition of terrorism is based entirely around what works for our global foreign policy interests and our global interests in general. So if Iran does anything to American soldiers, attacks anyone, immediately we say Iran is attacking America. Even if Iran hacks us, it'll be Iran is attacking America. And then once you have done that, that is when you can start escalating and affect what you would call security measures. But what they truly are slow escalations toward ethnic cleansing. And the problem with how we view the concept of ethnic cleansing is we look at the most extreme examples. We look at the Holocaust, and we look at the atrocities in Bosnia, in Eastern Europe in the 90s. But ethnic cleansing is not necessarily just an immediate genocide. And in fact, the precursors to the Holocaust were not flat out genocide. Most of the Holocaust was not systematic murder. Of course, the most extreme portion of it was where 10 million people were killed, where 6 million Jews were exterminated. But the exterminations didn't start until the 40s. But the systemic and constant deprivation of minority rights, you put them on watch lists because they're a threat. That's what is currently happening to Iranian Americans. That's what has been happening. Trump trying to create a Muslim registry. They start losing privacy because they're on watch lists. They're being monitored by the FBI. And now the police state, which has been used against all Americans, is now specifically being used to surgically target Muslims. You try to institute a travel ban. Now, that was defeated by the Supreme Court back then. But if you cite national security in the case of a wartime effort, suddenly you're going to get a lot more leeway, because there are implicit emergency powers afforded to a president during wartime that allow them to do things that could be considered complete atrocities by any judiciary in peace. This is exactly what happened when FDR enacted the mass internment of Japanese Americans. So you've got the travel ban, and then you start detaining people, and you have detainment, and you have internment camps. And the thing about detainment, the thing about travel bans, the thing about all of these things is that once you affect them, they're designed to target specifically, they're designed to target Iranian Americans by, like, explicit design. The wording in them will say Americans of Irani descent or suspected Irani descent. And you will target them by national origin. But then what you can do is you can use any incompletion, irregularity, inconsistency in any of their paperwork to basically say, oh, this could be fake paperwork. They could actually be an Irani agent trying to circumvent our security measures, and then use that to affect the measures. Of course, it's bogus. You know, there'll be like a missed photocopy of my let's say my Afghanistani passport. There's a missing photocopy page in one record, and they say, oh no, we have to verify this. And then what they'll do is they'll basically stick you in an internment camp until that's settled. And the whole point is they're not trying to settle the irregularity. They're looking for the irregularity so they can use it as a pretext to add you to the net, because they're not just targeting people of that national origin. They're not just targeting Iranian Americans. It's just those are the only people that they can legally go after. And so they're going to widen the net to include anyone that they can. And like, so this is being used, of course, by America, but we also see it used by BJP in Kashmir in the Northeast, and that's exactly what they're doing. They're annexing Kashmir in order to provoke Muslim insurgent violence. And what that does is it gives the Indian army a pretext to retaliate and start kicking Muslims out of different regions of Kashmir on suspicions of supporting terrorists. Because if you support any form of Kashmiri independence, you would be considered somebody who's supporting Pakistani sponsored terrorism. And that's exactly what BJP is doing. Not only that, but with Muslim insurgent groups now attacking Indian military elements, which is only to be expected when you go into a region and deprive them of their rights, they can start saying, see, India is under attack, we need to start worrying about Muslim immigrants. And that's one of the pretexts to start kicking Muslims out of the Indian Northeast. And this is exactly what Likud does with Gaza and the West Bank, is that they deprive them consistently of material conditions. They settle on their land, they continue to take their property, they continue to take Palestinian property and appropriate it for Israel. And then when rockets are fired and even destroyed in the sky by the Iron Dome, or when the shrapnel injures someone or causes property damage, they use it as a pretext to commit massive incursions that horrendously violate the human rights of civilians, especially in Gaza. And that's why Gaza is referred to by leftists as an open-air prison, because it constantly takes abuse, and any time it tries to retaliate, it faces disproportionate response. And for what it's worth, this is exactly what the alt-right will do to Jewish Americans and Israel the moment it gets the chance. With Israel's actions in the Middle East, once the alt-right gets the opportunity, it is going to scapegoat Israel for every anti-Muslim foreign policy action in the world that has happened. And they're going to try and say, see, Israel is trying to make Jews the only race in America. And they're going to do everything they can to undermine American Zionism and basically engage in anti-Semitic tropes of the international cabal, of the dual loyalty trope. They are going to try to weaponize America against its own Jews and against Judaism abroad, including the nation of Israel. And no matter what you think about their politics, in terms of Likud, in terms of Netanyahu, what you think about human rights atrocities committed in Gaza and the West Bank, if you cannot have a commitment to denouncing Israel's human rights atrocities while also having a concerted commitment to the fight against anti-Semitism in America, which is on the rise, as we have seen in New York, and in Europe, which has always been flaring, that these are not contradictory statements. That we need to protect Jewish Americans, we need to protect Muslims from the Israeli far right. These are basic cosmopolitan moral beliefs that everyone is deserving of basic human rights and integrity. And as soon as white supremacists and the alt-right get the opportunity, they are going to weaponize the Israeli far right against Jews here in America, and they already have the tropes and the tropes and stereotypes set up in place with which to do it. And that's peripherally, that's why it's very, very important to resist tropes on, you know, Jews owning the media or being like excessively rich, to understand that these are very, very factually inaccurate, that there are huge statistical misrepresentations that cause these tropes to be considered. And B, to understand that these are not benign tropes, that they're being set up for future political plays. And absolutely that is what the alt-right is going to do. And the alt-right is the primary operating fascist base in America. So they are to be taken seriously. Even if they don't have hard systemic political power, their power and mainstreaming and influence is creeping, if only in the way that anti-Semitism is slowly being mainstreamed in America as well. So all of these things are important to notice, to recognize, and to call out. And it's starting here at home with our actions against Iran, with the travel ban against Muslims. All of these things are interconnected. BJP's actions in the Northeast and Kashmir. They are in conjunction with an effort on the part of developed countries in the world to slowly try to rid the world of Muslims. And it's not going to stop there. It's going to stop. It's going to continue on to other minorities. I don't know how far, how close to the chopping block I personally am, but we are definitely headed. We're headed to other groups as well, if not already going there.